But I'm also here to as part of the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, which includes Heal Together, which is a partner with the Defense of Democracy, and we're work with community organizations across the country that are organizing parents around education equity, essentially. And so today I'm going to be talking about an anti-privatization campaign that we have going on. And so I'm going to give a little bit. I know that you guys are really experts on all issues of education, and on privatization. But I'm going to give a little bit of some background on school vouchers for those of you who might, need a little bit of a brush up, and maybe hopefully it'll be some good factoids for those of you who already know stuff. So just basics again, school vouchers, they come by many different names, right? They're called scholarships. They could be tax credits. There's lots of different ways that they happen, but essentially it's a way to direct public funds towards private schools. This map, sometimes we get great resources from our enemies. This is from the Education Freedom Alliance. This is the Alex map of the places that currently have universal school vouchers and the places that they want to have universal school vouchers. So the yellows are places where, as of now, and some of these just passed in the last few weeks, any child in these states, in the yellow states here, the gold ones, can get public taxpayer dollars to attend private school, regardless of their income level, regardless of their ability level, regardless of where they live. So you have millions and millions of taxpayer dollars going straight into private schools. And then the blues are the places where sort of this, right-wing mega voucher machine, really advocacy machine, is hoping to this year pass universal vouchers. So that's where we're at right now. And I want to just give a little bit of a context for why are we facing this? Why are these billionaires and these huge right-wing organizations putting so much into school vouchers? And so this quote, I think, captures a lot of that it really is part of an ideological push to shift away from public education and the notion that the government should fund schools that educate every child to what they call here a return at all levels to free market private schools, church schools, and homeschools as the normative American practice. That is the goal, to shift from a system of public education to church schools, homeschools, and private schools as the sort of standard practice. So that's the direction in which we are going. And it's interesting to note that at the same time that this country in 1954 decided that public education for every child was a thing that should be offered, right, with Brown versus Board, was when vouchers were born. So when Prince Edward County, Virginia, and a lot of other places decided to defy Brown versus Board and to shut down their schools instead of having to open them to Black children, what the Virginia Assembly did was create vouchers. So they gave vouchers to white families for their kids to attend segregated schools, and they gave nothing to the Black kids. So Black kids were home for years and years at this. And so that really that was like the nugget that the sort of conservative movement took and said, like, we want to do this nationally. That became really the model for school vouchers. So that's kind of the origin story of school vouchers. And a lot of you may know this, but this is kind of a refresher on who uses vouchers, right? Affluent families, mostly white families, mostly families that never attended a public school. They were already in private school, and now instead of paying it for themselves, they're getting public money to pay for it. Um, let's see. Yeah, almost, the vast majority of voucher schools are religious schools, like, huge, huge numbers here in all states. So that's who's getting this money. And they're terrible specifically for rural communities because, first of all, most rural communities don't have private schools, and so they're paying for them without taking advantage of them. And because there's a smaller tax base, and losing only a small number of students to homeschool or to something else, can really tank a school. So they're specifically really damaging for rural communities. And I think it's important just to make sure everybody knows, like, these are not these like elite private schools that have, horses and robotic programs and amazing lacrosse teams. Like, this is not that kind of private school. These are mostly opportunists who are taking advantage. They're religious schools which were on the verge of closing, and they're people who can set up a private school in their basement and get taxpayer money for it. They're what people call subprime schools. They often close within just a couple of years. So these are not like amazing elite private schools that, really rich people try to send their kids to. And these programs have no accountability at all. You know, in many states in Florida, I've heard like of many families whose kids graduate from voucher school not realizing that colleges won't accept the diploma because it's not accredited. So there are, although states can decide to pass laws that would hold these schools accountable, they largely do not. And so in most schools, no teacher qualification standards, no background checks, no reporting on student outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. And the schools can discriminate, right? They can exclude their private schools. They can exclude whoever they want for whatever reason. They also are incredibly expensive. You may have heard about in Arizona, which is was like the first universal voucher state. So Arizona is kind of like the future of the rest of the universal voucher states. They're now spending almost $1 billion a year on voucher schools for almost entirely, of the vast majority of them, families that never went to public schools. So that's $1 billion on top of what they were already paying for for the regular public school system. It hasn't decreased the cost of the public school system at all. So in Arizona, they've had to cut water projects, they've cut road projects, all of this infrastructure projects have had to be suspended because of the enormous growing cost of vouchers. And after all of this, the voucher schools don't do very well. In fact, if you go to a voucher school, your student outcomes are likely to decrease even more than student outcomes decreased during the pandemic or during natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina. So with all of these, the academic outcomes are actually extremely poor. So I'll say the good news in all of this is that people hate vouchers. They're incredibly unpopular. Every single time over the past, 50 years, every single time vouchers have come to a ballot referendum, they've been voted down every single time. And even just this past in November 2024, there was 3 states that had vouchers on the ballot: Colorado, Kentucky, Nebraska. All 3 of them defeated them. In Kentucky, every single county voted down vouchers, even though most counties went for Trump. So even in like extremely red counties, places, that are very aligned with the Republican Party, which is very aligned with vouchers, people voted Republican and voted down vouchers. And you see just these really interesting bipartisan coalitions: rural, urban, faith, homeschoolers, even folks who don't want regulation on their homeschools, who come together to defeat vouchers in many states. So what you may not know as much about, hopefully I was like maybe gave you a little bit of information you didn't know, but what you may not know as much about is the federal voucher bill. So right now, the Educational Choice for Children Act, ECHA for short, was proposed last year, and it's now being considered as part of the federal budget reconciliation process. So ECHA directs $10 billion a year for 10 years, so a total of $100 billion of federal tax dollars to private school vouchers. And it basically it sends this money directly to states. So it's not an opt-in. So if you're Kentucky and you just voted down vouchers in November, you are about to get them from ECHA, right? Even doesn't matter, the state can't opt in or out. They're going to get these vouchers automatically. And what it does is provide a dollar for dollar tax credit to anybody who instead of paying your federal taxes, you pay into these scholarship granting organizations and you get that exact amount of money off of your taxes. In fact, you can donate stock and you not only get a dollar for dollar tax credit, but you also don't have to pay capital gains on that stock. So it really functions as a supreme tax shelter for the wealthy, and people can donate up to 10% of their income. So someone like Jeffrey Yass, who is worth billions of dollars, could donate hundreds of millions of dollars into these scholarship granting organizations, get that money straight off of his taxes and avoid paying taxes on all of the stock that he donates. So it's like an incredible tax shelter. It also, what it does is because, most charitable donations, you get about 37% of a tax deduction if you donate to the food pantry or the animal shelter or whatever. This is 100%. You get a dollar for dollar back. So it will actually divert money from every other place that people donate money for a tax deduction. This is a much more profitable way to do it. So, and all the things that apply to vouchers: no accreditation requirements, no outcomes reporting, nothing like that. So we're very concerned about this because it's the federal budget reconciliation process is now in effect. And the challenge right now is to get it pulled out of budget reconciliation and to get enough Republicans in Congress to oppose it and to take it out so that, it doesn't get folded into the bill. And so we have a couple of strategies that we're employing to do that. The main one is that we have identified about 20 congressional Republicans who have been pro-public school in one way or another. Either maybe they were against vouchers in their state, maybe they have, taken signed on to pro-public school resolutions or taken other stances that are pro-public schools. And we are organizing people in those districts to really encourage them to stand up for public education in Congress. And when I come out of this slide deck, I'll share the list of those elected officials with you. The second is that we're really trying to find parents who have personally experienced harm from voucher schools. So maybe they were in a voucher school and it closed. Maybe their kid was rejected because they weren't Christian or because they were gay or because they had a disability or anything else. We've heard from parents who had signed a contract with a voucher school, lost their job, couldn't pay the rest of the tuition, and were taken to collections court, and their wages were garnished or their house was seized because they could not pay the remainder of the private school tuition. So there's all kinds of ways that people have been, harmed by voucher schools, and we're trying to find parents who have had those experiences and are willing to speak about it publicly to public officials, to the press, etc. And the third is to really expose the billionaires who are behind this scheme and the elected officials who are taking their money. Because this is not an organic, as you know, in most policies in education, this is a profit-making venture. That's why this is happening. The public hates vouchers. That's good. That's good for us. We have the public opinion. What we don't have is the power to make that public opinion law. And so the billionaires have been, buying off legislators, running these incredible ad campaigns, and, to promote this. And so we want to make it very clear, why is this happening? Who's making money off of this? And who are the people who are bought off because of it? And so I had reached out to Karen to sort of share some of this campaign, wanted to share it with you all, and we welcome any questions and also anybody's participation who's interested in joining us on any of these strategies.
So thank you, Megan. That was actually a really compact but intense and information-filled presentation. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on the chat, and the one thing that people ask for is if you can provide the slide deck.
Definitely. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see the chat when I was presenting, but absolutely.
Awesome. And then Lizette Fernandez has linked an article, and it's an NBC article that the headline is "Graduate Can't Enroll in College Because Her School is Not Accredited."
Thank
So I
you.
don't know if that might be useful to you.
That's great. I will take a look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? I see a lot of like statements. I do see like, in Ohio, there's things happening. Would love to do a call to action for, okay. So this is why I love my volunteers. Okay, so now we're talking about a call to action for DofD volunteers to email and call these legislators. So I tell you what, Megan, I would like to maybe get together with you offline, and Lauren, if you want to join us. I know, Lauren, that you've already like taken on an awful lot as a volunteer state director, but I think that maybe the three of us can come together with this specific call to action, and we can figure out how to mobilize defensive democracy, our volunteers, and our other contacts to do this, to really help with this project. I see another question. How would payments for homeschools be handled? Oh, that's a good question under this line.
Yeah. So this is a fascinating one. So basically people get a check and they can use it for whatever they want. And I'll say that slide deck was much reduced from the longer one that I have, but one of the slides I have in the longer deck shows the kinds of things you can buy. So people have bought trampolines, you can buy tickets to Disney, you can buy kayaks, you can buy Lego sets, you can buy basically anything in most states with this money. And so you can have private school families that are buying trampolines for their backyards with the kids that they're homeschooling. And that would apply for the ECA for the federal voucher bill as well, that homeschool parents could get this money for really anything that they want to spend it on.
What? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Holy mackerel. What a good question, though. I wouldn't have even
Yeah.
thought of that.
And I'll say one thing that's been very interesting is there have been in many states homeschool parents who have opposed vouchers because they see it's a gateway to regulation. Although there really is no regulation on vouchers right now, they want to educate their children in a certain way. That's why they're homeschooling them, and they're concerned that if they get federal money or get taxpayer money, that the next thing that happens is regulation. So in many states, they have actually been a really interesting ally in the fight against vouchers.
Okay, really great. Yeah, as a certified fraud examiner, this concerns me. Okay. So I think I just thank you, Craig. I think that we don't have any further specific questions for Megan, but we are going to leave. Megan's going to be providing me with the presentation, and we are going to work directly with you and very quickly, hopefully. I'll send you my calendar as soon as we end this call, so that you and Lauren and myself can maybe put together a specific call to action for the Defense of Democracy teams. And I do see some of my other volunteer state directors from around the country saying that you want to do a similar call to action. So let's all do it. Megan, thank you so much for presenting today. I know that you are doing some really good work, and it's not a light lift for any of us here. So just thank you for taking the time to come up
Thank you for giving me the time. I'm excited to be here.
Great. All right. At this moment now, I am going to stop the recording. We're going to open the breakout rooms, and you should be able to choose your breakout room. And Megan, you are welcome to. Oh, was I going to